Question here?
I've got a double-deck question. We've got a friend that's spent probably the last 30 years basking in the sun, burning her skin. She goes to the beach, she spends 5 or 6 hours sunbaking all right through summer. And yet my wife ended up with a melanoma between her fingers, which were never ever exposed to the sun. Can anyone throw any light on where the difference between the two lies?
Is this something that somebody would like to take up?
I could try. I think that, as Grant just said, that there is an element of luck involved. There's likely to be genetic bases, so predispositions that certain individuals have for the development of melanoma, where they may already have mutations that have been passed through generations even, that makes them more susceptible to receiving, or they may require less hits in order to develop the disease. We're working on identifying what some of those risk factors might be. To date, it's been actually quite difficult, but we're now with the advent of new technologies to be able to do genetic sequencing and these sorts of approaches. In the future, I think that there will be quite rapid advances in identifying those genetic risk factors.
Grant or Michael, do you have anything to add to that?
Bad luck things that can happen in life, that almost any cell is capable of dividing can turn into cancer if you're unlucky. It's one of the reasons why cancer is more common as you get older, because there's just this accumulated bad luck mutation events that happen in the cells. So we do see in Australia about 6% of melanomas arise in places of the body that see very little or never see the sun. So you can get melanoma on the genitals, you can get it in the throat. Anywhere where there's those pigmented melanocytes, if you get unlucky, one of them can change with these mutations into melanoma.
Given that a member of the family died from melanoma, what's the genetic possibility of future generations having the same issue?
There is evidence that that melanoma can run in families. As yet, there is, as I mentioned before, there's a bit of a lack of understanding as to what the genetic basis of that is, but there is some evidence to suggest that there are melanoma syndromes that run in families. But I would say that the predominant incidence of melanoma occurs as a result of non-familial events.
Yeah, in Australia it's only about 5% of melanomas maximum seen run. It's just because we have a lot of fair-skinned Caucasians in Australia, and we have this world highest rates of UV, so most melanomas are an environment cause, not running in families. There's genetic modifiers, as Michael and Claire have touched on. But what we look for, a simple way, I guess, of answering the question is, who do we refer off for genetic testing in that had a melanoma? We look for more than 2 melanomas in the family, and melanomas arising in young people. They're risk factors for referring off. So if you've had 3 people in the family that have had melanoma, or 2, and one of those being a young person aged less than 40, we'd consider referring for some genetic counselling. But most of the time there is no identifiable genetic factor found at this stage, and more research is needed.
You're not going to believe this, but we are really rapidly running out of time, so we have time for your question there in the front. And maybe one more after that. Please.
Thank you, first of all. My question relates to prevention. There are a large group in Grant's chart there of middle-aged males, and there are a large number, I assume it's based on the fact that there are a large number of outdoor workers that are through no other option, they have to work in the midday sun, and with the old slip slop, often that illness or desertion means they cannot, maintain the protection. Is there any work on that aiding them of not just applying cream from the outside, but somehow protecting the skin from the inside?
There's it's got to be said that most reputable companies that have worked outside recognise their responsibilities as employers, and you'll see people with white hats on, you'll see council trucks wandering around, and there'll be a big bottle of sunscreen in the truck. The problem is that it's a multi-dimensional problem, and I'll give you an example of how complicated it is. If you burn, that is, you've got the sort of skin that burns rather than tans, that's a risk factor for developing melanoma. So that's something innate that you're born with. It's probably got nothing to do with anything else. We know that if you've got lots of moles on your body, you've got an increased risk of getting melanoma. And that's probably something else that you've inherited in a very complicated fashion. We know that the timing that you get your UV exposure is pretty important, and it turns out that the first 25 years are so important, so that's why the Cancer Council and the schools have done such a large amount of work in looking after school children. So that's why those of you who have got school-aged children will know that the playground areas are covered with the sunshades, that the kids have got to wear the hats with the collars down the back or a wide-brimmed hat. They have to wear sunscreen when they go out. So it's a very complicated issue. Now, this problem of older males getting melanoma is something we don't yet understand, but the problem is older males make up 15% of the population, that is males over the age of 60, yet they account for 50% of the deaths. And we've come to recognise a particularly virulent form of melanoma in that age group. And the appearance of it can be quite deceptive. So to get back to your original question, why is it happening? We're not absolutely certain, but it's probably a combination of many things, of which sun exposure has got something to do with it. We've also seen an increase in the death rate from melanoma in women over the age of 60, but it's not quite as great. So it's not going to be just simply because they're blokes outside working in a pair of short shorts and a t-shirt without anything else for long hours.
Jamie, you want to add anything to that?
I think it's not until someone in your family or one of your friends is diagnosed with melanoma that people sort of catch on how serious it is. That's usually the way it works, and unfortunately, that's why awareness campaigns are so important.
Okay, we have time for one more question, which is the gentleman up there, Rebecca. Yes,
even though pathologists reports clear margins for the excision of an early melanoma, skin melanoma, there's no 100% guarantee that metastasis will not occur. Are there any tests or scans that can be done to detect early metastases before any clinical signs begin?
I'll take that one. Yeah, that's a really good question, because if it was possible to predict very early whether the melanoma cells had spread, you'd be able to use more intensive treatment like interferon J, which is quite a toxic treatment, and just reserve that for those at risk. Or turning it the other way around, it would be very reassuring if we know that someone had melanoma that was never going to return, and therefore they could just focus on prevention and they didn't need to worry about follow-up with doctors. So this is still an area of research. There's blood tests that are used sometimes in Europe that we do not believe in this country are very reliable. It's a test called an S100 blood test. It's not very sensitive, it only picks up fairly significant burdens of melanoma. You can use scans, but again, scans like PET scans, you have to have fairly substantial size lumps, 5 millimetres or greater in diameter to be able to detect them. And there are new technologies that are still very much in the research stage, and that is to look for circulating melanoma cells in the blood at very low levels. Picking up one cell in a million that might be a melanoma cell. Those That is not ready for prime time yet. We've never used that as part of the routine follow-up of patients, but it requires a lot more research. And I think that could be very valuable, like to reassure people that melanoma's never going to come back, or alternatively say, look, we could be in trouble here in the future, we need to intensify treatments. I mean, probably the one test that's most useful is something that Professor Henderson's expert in, which is a thing called sentinel lymph node biopsy. So I mentioned two new treatments coming through. One is BRAF treatment, and the other one is the immune treatment ipilimumab. And trials are underway or have been completed in patients that have what we call a positive sentinel lymph node. That's the first lymph node that the skin around the melanoma, the cells go to after they leave the melanoma, and you can detect microscopic deposits. That's what happened to Jay. Now, with these two new treatments, those trials are underway or have been completed, and if positive, that test will allow us to predict who's at most risk of melanoma returning and try to kill off the cells when they're still microscopic using these new treatments. So I think if we're all gathering together in 10 years, that'll be a standard treatment, and I predict that will lead to a reduction in mortality from melanoma.
Well, I hate to say it, but I think we're going to have to bring the event to a close. I think we could talk for another hour at least. I thank you all very, very much for coming out tonight. And I ask you to put your hands together and thank our panel.